Hello and welcome to our number talk. Today we are looking at the expression 14 times 20. And what we do in a number talk is we use mental math. That means no paper, no pencil, to try to solve this expression, and then we keep track of our strategy. So before we go any further, let's go ahead and do that. Pause the video, figure out 14 times 20. When you have the solution, unpause the video. We will look at all of the different ways that you could have solved it. So the first method that we can use is multiplying by multiples of 10, 100, or 1,000. So take a look at what we could do here with 14, and I'm going to drop that 0. I'm just going to say 14 times 2. So 14 times 2 is a pretty easy double. We're just going to double our 14. We're going to make that 28. Well, 2 kind of connects here. That's our multiple of 10 right there. So 14 times 20. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take our 14 times 2 again. We're going to take our 28, but we're just going to add a 0. And that's a nice trick that we need to learn to use when we multiply by multiples of 10, 100, or 1,000. Because 2 times 10 gets you 20. So our 28 times 10 is going to get you 280, which is our answer. Hopefully you got that. Another way that we could solve this is to use the distributive property. We're going to use the distributive property to break apart our 20. And you see how I've broken apart our 20 into a 10 plus 10. So what we do is we distribute that 14 out. That means we're going to multiply by both of those add-ins to create partial products. So we're going to take our 14, and instead of multiplying it by 20, we're going to multiply it by 10. That's an easy 140. And we're going to multiply 14 times the other 10 that's remaining. That's another easy 140. Once again, obviously, getting us back to our solution of 280. Another way we can use the distributive property is to break apart the other factor. Let's see if we can go ahead and make that into a, let's make that into a multiplication. Our other factor into half. So instead of breaking apart that 20, let's break apart that 14 into our 7 plus 7. And we're still going to distribute this multiplication out to both of those add-ins to make our partial products. So this is really 7 times 20, 140 again, plus another 7 times 20, another 140, bringing us back once again to 280. Now the distributive property, sometimes you can break it in half, but you know what? When you are in doubt, you can always break apart by tens and ones. Think of place values. We're going to take this 14 and we're going to pretend like we're writing it in expanded form. So we're going to do 10 plus 4, and we're going to use the distributive property to go ahead and still break apart that 14 into 10 to 4 and multiply 20 by both of those add-ins to give you your partial product. So this is really a 10 times 20. So that's pretty easy. 1 times 2 gets you 2. And I've got 2 zeros left over, so let's add 2 zeros and make it 200. And then we're going to add that 4 times 20. That's going to be an easy 80. So we're coming back again to 280. So when we're done with the distributive property, we always look to see, can we double in half? So double in half is a nice way of using the associative property, but really we just think of it as doubling and halving. So we're going to take our 14 times 20. Here's how doubling and halving works. If you take one of your factors and you cut it in half. So you notice we've got our 14. I want to cut that in half by 7. So that's why this is gray down here. So I'm going to take away half of it. In order to keep a balanced equation, since I divided the first factor by 2, I need to multiply the other factor by 2. So I halved the first factor, I doubled the second factor, and that's going to get me 40. That's why I've got my 20 and 20 right here. So I took one factor, cut it in half, I took the other factor and doubled it, and I'm going to get 7 times 4 equals 28, add that 0, 280 once again. We can also double in half by cutting that 20 in half. So we're going to take our 14 times 20. This time we're going to go ahead and take our 20, and we're going to cut this thing in half, so that's going to be divided by 2. So let's get rid of this half right here. In order to keep a balanced equation, we now need to go ahead and double the other factor. So I've got 28. So that's why I've got 14 and 14 right there. That gets me 28. So 28 times 10 is really just going to be 28 with an extra 0. You guessed it, 280. Now, sometimes we can use other properties. I mentioned the associative property, so this is how we can break this down into the associative property. 14 times 20 is really, let's take apart that 20 and let's call it 14 times, and let's call it 5 times 4. So 20 is really 5 times 4. I'm going to break that apart. We're not adding here, so that we're not using the distributive property. The associative property is the grouping property. So I'm going to take my group of 3 factors, 14 and 5 and 4. I'm going to change the group. Instead of 14 groups of 5 groups of 4, I'm going to shift my parentheses. So you notice how I keep all 3 factors the same. And it's just going to be 14 times 5 in the parentheses, and then multiply that by 4. That's the associative property. Now my commutative property is my order property. I'm going to go ahead and flip the order here, just because I don't want to group 14 groups of 5. I'd rather do 5 groups of 14. And then I'm going to use my associative property, or my commutative property, one more time. I want to do 4 groups of 5 groups of 14. Now how does that help me if I do 4 groups of 5 groups of 14? I'm just rearranging all of these factors. Well, here's my 5 groups of 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got my 5 groups of 14 right here. So I could do 5 times 14. That's going to give me 70. Now I've got 4 groups of the 5 groups of 14. So I'm just going to skip count by 70s. 140, 210, 280. Notice I'm just looking at 7, 14, 21, 28, adding a 0. So I'm going to get back to my 280 there. Finally, I can use my associative property, and I'm going to take my 14 times 20, and instead of breaking up that 20, let's break up that 14. Let's say it's 2 times 7 times 20, and all we got to do is shift those parentheses. That's pretty easy. 2 times 7 times 20. The parentheses are around the 7 times 20. I want 2 groups of 7 groups of 20. So here's my 7 groups of 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because 7 times 20 is pretty easy. That's going to be 140. Then here's my 2 groups. I'm going to double that, and guess what I'm going to get? 280. So those are all the different ways that I can think of to find 14 times 20 using mental math. If you could find another way, that is fantastic. Go ahead and leave a comment on the video. If you are a teacher and you would like a copy of the slide deck for your own use in the classroom, you can find it on my website, 5minutemath.net.